Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue my series on adapting the board game Source of the Nile, and in particular, I would like to look at the consequences of sickness. In the last video, we looked at how some characters can become sick from lack of food. There will be other ways that they can become sick in the game, but that's the first way that we've looked at, is lack of food. And now we have to look at the consequences of becoming sick. Basically, the expedition won't be able to, if anyone is sick, they can't walk. They need to be carried, and if there's not enough people to carry them, then the expedition has to just sit there. And also, if you are sick, you will eventually either recover from your sickness or you will die. Which, if it happens to you, the player character, of course, means the end of the game. So I've set up an expedition. I set it up sort of so that it would run out of food. I didn't get any rations or any bearers, so it's not a very realistic expedition. But as expected, we made camp and went hunting. We did get some game, but it wasn't enough. And the chance, as the message says, the chance of sickness or desertion is 9 out of 11. Although we have several specialists with us who were lucky and didn't fall ill. Only the player character falls ill this time, as well as 8 bearers deserting. But because we have fallen sick, the player character has fallen sick, we need to now roll to see what happens. And we were lucky, we rolled a 1, which means that we recover. 1 or 2 means recover. 3 means that you are improving, which means that you will have an advantage on future rolls. 4 means no change, and 5 or 6 means death. So it's quite a simple system. In most role-playing games, you'd probably expect to have some sort of stat that affected this. So you might have constitution, and that might give you a bonus or penalty to your roll, or you might have hit points that go down if you are sick, and if they go down to 0, you're dead. But in this case, it's very simple. It's just a single roll of a die. Obviously, there's scope for making that more complicated. I was thinking of bringing a system of hit points in for the at least for the player character. But for now, that's how it is. There's quite a lot of text here with no choice, which is not good game design. But I would ask you to bear in mind that everything in red probably won't be in the game. I was talking about making it optional, but I'm sort of leaning more towards just not having it. And these message that says testing only will definitely not be in the game either. So there's significantly less. There will be significantly less than what you're seeing here. So having looked at what it does, let's have a look at the code that allows it to happen. So there aren't any new variables. There's a new, or at least a sort of newly filled in. I think last video it was the page existed, but it was just blank. So we had starvation. That was what we were looking at before, and now we have sickness. In this page, I've made a small change. You might recall that there's a few places where I included a page classify expedition. Well, because this page goes straight onto this page, and because this page can also lead to losses in the expedition, we're going to have to check classify expedition from this page anyway, so there's no point checking it from this one. So I've got rid of all of those includes from this page, and instead that is now done when we finish with all the rolls for recovery. So let's have a look at sickness. So the first thing we need to do is we need to set a value into the variable w, and that value is going to be either 0 or -1. And what determines that is if the expedition has a doctor, and if the doctor is not themselves sick or improving, then W will be -1, and if that is not the case, W will be 0. In this case, rolling low is better, and so basically the value of W is added to the roll, or the simulation of the roll of a die, and lower rolls are better, and so having a -1 added to it is an improvement. So how do we do that? Well, we say if P2 equals 1, which means if there's a doctor present in the expedition, and if S2 does not equal 1, and if S2 does not equal 2. If S2 is equal to 1, then that means the doctor is sick, and if S2 is equal to 2, that means the doctor is classed as improving. But in the fiction of the game, they're considered, even if they're improving, they're not well enough to try and heal anyone else. So they're sort of, you don't get the bonus. But if neither of those things are the case, if the doctor's there, they're not sick, they're not improving, then W is -1. And if W is anything other than -1, W is, sorry, if any of these are not the case, then W is 0. Then we have a for loop that goes from 0 to C dot length -1, which means it will go through every specialist that might be present. And that for loop ends here. So most of the code is actually this for loop. Most of the code on this page is that for loop. And for each of those, we say if PZ is equal to 1 or Z is equal to 0, and if SZ is equal to 1 or SZ is equal to 2. So what does that mean? Well, if PZ is equal to 1, that means that that particular specialist is part of the expedition. And if Z equals 0, then we're dealing with the player character. And the player character is always present while the game is continuing. And so this basically means if the person that we're talking about is present in the expedition. And if SZ equals 1 or SZ equals 2 means if that person is either sick or improving. If the person is well, obviously we don't need to roll to see if they recover from a sickness that they don't have. So if that's the case, then we do quite a lot of stuff. It goes all the way down to there. I think that's the right one. Let's have a look. No, sorry, all the way down to that one. So most of this for loop, and so on, most of this for loop is actually inside this if. In other words, it's mostly dealing with what happens if we have a character that is present and sick. So the first thing we do is we set y equal to random 1 to 6. Obviously that simulates the roll of a normal 6-sided die. Then we have one of these cases where we put a bunch of code into a variable, in this case x, and then print it at the end. And the reason we do that is because if we tried to print as we went, I found that this span, which means the beginning, essentially the beginning of a paragraph, and this slash span, it didn't recognize that those two were meant to be referring to the same paragraph, and so it generated an error. So all it does, it says span style equals color red, so this is going to be red text. If z equals 0, then we say u roll, otherwise we say CZ rolls. CZ is a variable that has the names of the different types of specialists. So this will be something like botanist rolls or doctor rolls or anthropologist rolls. Then we add whatever the number we rolled was, and then we just have slash span and a couple of line breaks. So it'll be something like doctor rolls are 5, anthropologist rolls are 3, etc. We print all that. If there is a bonus for the doctor, which is this thing that we were calculating up here, if there's a bonus for the doctor, we add it to y, or it'll just be -1. And if SZ is equal to 2, in other words, if the person is improving, then we reduce y by 1 again, or separate to this. And so that's what improving means. It just means you get a -1 on any subsequent rolls. We have a little note to ourselves which gives us the results. 2 or less is recovery, 3 is you become improving, 4 is no change, 5 or 6 means you are dead. In the original rules, it's the other way around between 3 and 4, so 3 means no change and 4 means improving. I changed it because this way it goes neatly from best to worst. Recovery is better than improving, which is better than no change, which is better than dying. And that just felt more neater to me. It doesn't really have any game consequences, but I decided to change it. And then we have the outcome of y, which is the die roll and then possibly modified by these modifiers. If y is less than 3, we either print you recover, if it's you, or the relevant specialist recovers. We have a couple of line breaks. We set SZ to 0 because that's the status that means you're not sick. Otherwise, if y equals 3 and SZ does not equal 2, in other words, if you rolled a 3 and you're not already improving, then we're going to give you the message that either you seem to be improving or doctor or botanist seems to be improving, whatever it may be, with a couple of line breaks, and we set SZ to 2. Otherwise, if y is greater than or equal to 5, then we either say you died, the expedition is over, and we set P0 to -1, and I'll explain that in a second. Or we say CZ dies, so the doctor or the botanist or something dies, and we set PZ to 0. So before we were modifying SZ, this time we're modifying PZ because they're not, if they're dead, they're not there anymore. They're not in the expedition anymore. Now you might notice that there's not a couple of line breaks after this one, even though most of the other messages have had a couple of line breaks after them. That's because if you die, well, the game's not going to continue, of course, and so there's not going to be any other message that needs to be separated from this one. So why do we set P0 to -1? Well, simply because I needed some way of letting the computer know that the game has ended and therefore that we won't be continuing. And I decided to put that in PZ, in P0, excuse me, and I just said that I could have had a special variable like, I don't know, D for death or something. I don't think I have a D already. Nope. Oh yeah, no, I do. Well, whatever. I could have had a separate variable that is set to 1 if the game's over, but I just decided to have a note to myself that says P0 is set to -1 when the main character dies and the game is over. And sorry. Oh my goodness, this is hard to. There we go. So the final bit of code down here. Yeah, so that's the end of what we do if the character is sick. There may not be a message. You might notice that if you roll a 3 and you are already improving, you won't get a message. And also, if you roll a 4, there's no change, and there won't be a message for that either. And then we just close off the ifs and the for loop. And then here we have if P0 does not equal -1, then include classify expedition and then include discovery, which is the next thing we'll be looking at. This page is to do with sometimes a botanist might discover a new plant or something like that, and that will give you extra points, which we'll be looking at when we get to that page, although that won't be next video. I'm going to start looking at what happens when you meet natives. But, of course, if P0 does equal -1, and that will happen because the character, because you, the player character, rolled a 5 or a 6, if that does happen, well, then we're not going to continue and sort of nothing happens down here. And that's why we didn't need those line breaks, because this is going to be the final the final, the final message of the game. So that is our system for recovering from sickness. At the moment, the only way to get sick is by lack of food, but there will be at least one other way. But we'll deal with that as we come to it. As I said, it's a very simple system, and I may want to add a bit more detail later, but I'd rather just do the game basically as written and then sort of add to it once it's finished. So I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.